Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Calley, CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Operations at SBAM. Thanks for joining us today. We missed you all last week. I want to welcome one of our new elite members. They are Moonwinks, and they are also one of our class of 2026
Oh, I
Michigan
love
50.
Moonwings.
Yeah,
See,
Moonwinks.
they never tell me who's getting featured this. You have a lot of new members all the time, and then we pick one, and that's awesome.
All right, well, Moonwings gets two thumbs up from Brian Calley, and they are also a Michigan Celebrates Small Business 50 Companies to Watch winner from this past year. All right, so we have quite a show for you today, having missed last week. Let's start off with an unemployment update. This is the sixth month in a row that the state's unemployment rate has remained at 5%.
Yeah, and it's the same story. I had to look back, like, did we already cover this? Because I felt like deja vu on this. But basically, even though employment is going down modestly each month, it's kind of trailing with the labor force percentage going down. You only count as unemployment if you're looking for work. So if somebody exits the workforce, either by retirement or just because they gave up looking, then they no longer count as unemployed. You have to be actively seeking or employed to be in this fraction at all. And so it has remained the same. And this is it's just kind of a fascinating circumstance where normally you would have seen our unemployment rate ticking up over the last half year or so, and instead, because of labor force participation continuing to decline at a similar rate, it stayed remarkably similar.
All right, let's do one other story before we bring in a special guest, and that is the governor and the House of Representatives have settled their case about appropriations authority. So, Brian, can you remind us what this issue is all about?
There's this long-standing authority or power that the legislature has to uh, essentially to recapture dollars that are unspent for the previous year, something called work projects. And in work projects, the kind of normal course of business, historically speaking, is that the governor essentially notifies the legislature, we've got all these open work projects, it straddles over from one year to the next, and it's going to continue to the next year. Either appropriations committee of the House or the Senate could disallow that essentially transfer of the work project from one fiscal year to the next. So last year, the House discontinued hundreds of millions of dollars worth of projects from going forward, and there was some legal action that hadn't been done in a long time. I can't remember when it had been done before, and so there's not a lot of precedent for what happens then. And so there was a legal fight, and in the legal fight between the executive branch and the legislative branch, there was a settlement, and the House withdrew its case. But essentially, those work projects were canceled in this settlement. So in other words, that money that was unspent from the previous year, instead of moving to the next year, it just goes back into fund balance for reconsideration and appropriation today. And so this was people were really pretty interested in how this was going to play out, because even the Attorney General had weighed in and said, no, the House can't just do it on their own to cancel these work projects, which did seem to be in contradiction to what the law explicitly says. But in any event, that created a conflict, and a lot of us thought this would be resolved by the Supreme Court. And then all of a sudden it gets settled, and it gets settled in a way where the House got what it wanted, canceled the projects, put it back on the balance sheet. And I'm speculating a little bit here, but I think what has changed is that the economic picture of the state and the condition of the budget is tough compared to what it has been in previous years. So there hasn't been as much growth, and also they made some tax policy changes in the last couple of years that are kind of coming home to roost right now, and so those have made the budget more difficult. And I think probably what has happened is that the House and the governor looked at this situation and said, well, yeah, that might be a balance of powers fight, but we both have the same interest, which is we're short on money for next year. We better grab up that previous money and work together on how we want to appropriate it, changing priorities for the future. So again, that wasn't announced that way. It was just a legal settlement that settled. But how did these two opposing parties get on the same side all of a sudden? And the same side that on paper, at least, it looks like a major win for the House, or for the legislature, I should say, in terms of legislative powers. But really, I think the governor wants that money back on the balance sheet for consideration in the next year's budget just as much as anybody else. And so they have aligned interests. That aligned interests likely is what led to this settlement.
All right. Well, we have invited our colleague Kelli Saunders on today's show. She is a frequent co-host here. And Kelli, I just want to point out, did get the memo about what to wear for the briefing today. But Kelli and Brian are going to have a conversation about some policy and the Mackinac Policy Conference and other legislative happenings. So I'll turn it over to the two of you.
All right, Kelli, let's start with this with some issues. I wanted to cover a few things that were in the last Watchdog update. By the way, anybody watching, if you don't get our Watchdog updates, please do sign up. It's right in your membership profile. You just have to select it on there. We don't assume you want to hear about politics unless you say, hey, I want to hear about politics. Okay, so it's something you have to opt into. And if this is of interest to you, please do that. Just go sbam.org, log into your account, and select to receive this newsletter. Okay, so Kelli, let's talk first about the Office of Small Business. Pretty big move in economic development that is afoot. What's happening there?
Yes, and Brian, this will teach you to not check your text messages in the morning to get the wardrobe for the day. But it's always good to be back with everybody. We have been talking a lot about the budget over the last few weeks. The advocacy team, Jacob and Francesca, did do a briefing on that. And so this does tie into that with the Office of Small Business Growth. The legislature was off last week, but they will be working diligently this month to get the budget done, really. And so we've been in numerous conversations with both the Senate and the House about some changes that we think that would really help in order to make sure that small businesses thrive into the future. And it's a concept that's a return to economic gardening, which SBAM has talked about for years prior to even my arrival here at SBAM. But Brian, really, when you had started back at SBAM, this was a concept. And now we're seeing this come to a head, which is great. So not last week, but the week before, Senate Appropriations Committee Chair Senator Sarah Anthony introduced Senate Bills 1009 and 1010, which would create a permanent Office of Small Business Growth in the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And the office would shift essentially the direction of the Michigan Strategic Fund to prioritize small business development, basically called economic gardening. And these bills would closely follow longstanding SBAM policy positions on economic development. We obviously advocate for economic development strategy that incorporates principles of these economic gardening principles. And we know that growth in small businesses creates a diverse state economy that is more dynamic and reliable for during recession times. And so it only makes sense that the state's primary economic development tool promotes growth for businesses that are already here, creating a good atmosphere for the home team. And I want to say that we're not ever against the bigger business deals, but we know that focusing on small business is a proven mechanism to make sure that we are sturdy here. So the office itself would be responsible for administering grant programs geared towards small businesses and organizations that support small businesses and provide assistance through loans, direct grants, investments, and providing technical assistance. And the office would also act as a one-stop shop for small businesses within state government, and it helps employers navigate complex licensing and regulatory requirements and directing them to relevant resources and opportunities. And so the introduction of these two bills has kind of been a long time in waiting. It maybe has taken on different forms in the past, but we're so excited that Senator Anthony has introduced this concept that was funded in the Senate's budget as well to have that allocation. And we are also seeing mirror bills in the House of Representatives. Representative Nancy Jenkins Arno, who leads a very important committee in the House, has also introduced these bills. and they are working alongside each other to try and get this through the process so that this can be a part of MEDC's plan heading into the new fiscal year. So we couldn't be more grateful for that partnership, for the recognition that this is something that could really make sure that small businesses are a part of a broader statewide strategy when it comes to economic development. And so we're excited to continue to advocate for this during the budget process in the Senate and the House. And we're hopeful that it'll be included, hopefully, when this budget is signed at the end of this month or early next month.
It'd be a pretty big move to add small business as an explicit part of the Michigan Strategic Fund activities. And this is, people don't realize this is like the wallet of the MEDC. So the MEDC, a lot of the resources that they have for economic development that come from the Michigan Strategic Fund. And we think that it would be a great time to expand or make explicit in their mission that small business is the main event. Okay, all right, excellent. Now that there's also another really big issue on healthcare. People might remember back in 2018 for open enrollment for the year 2019, we briefly had association health plans available here where those small businesses had their own risk pool. And so that was allowed for a little while and then disallowed later. And so unfortunately, we couldn't continue to offer that service, but we've been trying to get back there ever since. And that previous I talked about federal law, but now looks like we have an avenue maybe in state law to add another important and more affordable option in healthcare for small businesses if we can get legislation across the finish line. What's happening there?
Well, these numbers are going to be sequential. This has been a very busy, we can say couple weeks, but really couple months for SBM. So we just talked about bills 1009 and 1010. 2 weeks ago, Senate Bill 1011. So these, you can just consider these three bills, SBM bills, as they've been coming through, was introduced by Senator Kevin Hertel. He is the chair of the Senate Health Policy Committee. And what this bill does is it offers a structural solution that we've been advocating for, to your point, since 2019. That is the framework for association health plans. So the framework in Michigan's insurance code for small business health pools, which is a state-regulated multi-employer welfare arrangement. It's sponsored by qualifying Michigan associations. Similar pools were allowed, to your point, in 2019, and this bill would utilize state authority under the Affordable Care Act to bring them back into the state level. So these association health plans would be available to small businesses between 1 and 500 employees, including sole proprietors. And every plan would be required to cover all essential health benefits and meet all ACA equivalent consumer protections and care standards. The bill also establishes a state-funded catastrophic reinsurance program that would cover 60% of high-cost claims between $75,000 and $250,000 per covered life, providing premium stabilization. And so we know that there's no silver bullet to all the cost increases that have been occurring over the last couple of years. We know that a lot of our members have seen double-digit increases for the last 2 years, and we anticipate that'll be the case again next year. But we're really excited about this legislation. We know that it would be a game changer because we saw what it could do in 2019 before it was halted. And so the fact that the Senate has taken a step to explore this, to put it into practice, is huge. And we hope that the House will see it the same way. We're starting to have conversations in that chamber as well. But we're really excited to get to work to advocate for this. We know that there's an appetite within the state legislature to find ways to decrease these very high percentages that we've seen over the last 2 years. And so, yeah, I mean, Brian, you've been at the center of it too, but it is huge to see this actually get introduced.
Yeah, this really, I mean, it's not a be all end all solution for everything, but it really is a meaningful step forward where it at least puts small businesses on equal footing with the same types of plan design and tools, control, negotiating authority that bigger self-insured companies have. And then even even better, to have within this proposal is that, that reinsurance for catastrophic. So the risk pool, essentially part of that risk being shared with the state, included in this legislation. Pretty big deal. Excited about this. All right, let's last issue here to talk about on in terms of state government legislation, TriShare. Maybe remind the audience what TriShare is, what's happening with it.
Yeah, TriShare was a program created, I want to say 5+ years ago now, actually more than that, I think 6 to 8. And it was a concept to try and help, again, no silver bullet, but a way to make childcare more affordable and accessible. And the program design is essentially a third, a third, a third. So the employee pays a third, the employer pays a third, and state government pays a third within a certain percentage income threshold. And so it was a way to put another tool in our toolbox to make sure that people could enter into or re-enter into the workforce and finding affordable childcare. It was initially launched as a pilot program to see if it was even popular and could survive. And after a few years, there was enough interest that that was the case. And so it was made a part of the appropriation process for the next few years as a standard program. That is offered out of the MyLeap department, which we work closely with. And there's been increased demand on it over the last few years as families try to find solutions and employers look for benefits to offer their employees in order to retain their talent. And so, what we have been advocating for over the last few years is because it started out like a pilot and it's subject to the appropriation process, some people are not finding stability within the program because it could kind of come and go as it pleases. The programming funding could be cut. And so what we're looking to do is to codify it into state law to make it a true blue program. And so there was a bill that was passed out of the Senate by Senator Mallory McMorrow, Senate Bill 310, that seeks to do so. And we know there will be a bill also introduced in the House soon by Representative Greg Van Workum, who actually started the program itself. And so when we see both chambers taking action in a direction that we love, and it's a bipartisan approach, we love that. We love it when people are working together. And so we're feeling confident that this program will be on much more firm footing moving forward, since there is a lot of interest in it from both chambers. Now, also in this same breath, the department has been really intentional about people who may not qualify for the TriShare program itself and creating a new program called CareShare. And essentially what that means is that they'll go into the system on the radar in case they ever were to qualify for TriShare, but they also administer the program with a third of the employer paying for the funds and then the employee paying for the rest, but the state administering it for them so that employers don't have to. And so we're really encouraged by the creativity that the department has found, that it's finding ways to continue to make childcare more accessible and affordable for employers and employees alike. And so we saw a lot of action in the last couple weeks on initiatives that we really care about, and we're encouraged by the direction that they're going in and the traction that they're getting. And so we wanted to bring that to the audience today to show how involved we are in all these pieces. And we'll continue to keep you updated via advocacy. Please make sure, to Brian's point, follow the watchdog. Make sure that you're checking back regularly on the website as we can continue to update you on these things. So really proud of this work. But Brian, last week you and I were on Mackinac Island. The Detroit Regional Chamber hosts the Mackinac Policy Conference every year, and this is a huge conference. It brings together business, philanthropic, and government leaders from all over the state to Mackinac Island. And there's very high profile speakers that come to this, including the governor, but they have national speakers. Former Vice President Mike Pence was there. The former Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, was there. And you really do get to connect with everyone that's super engaged and relevant in the policy and political process. So a really big announcement occurred before that conference, and the fact that independent candidate for governor Mike Duggan has pulled out. Tell us what came into that decision and how were the other gubernatorial candidates posturing up at this conference where a lot of heavy hitters were at and were taking notice?
It's a big change. You'd mentioned all the people that gather, and who follows them is the media. So like every major media outlet is there as well. And you got TV and radio and print that are covering kind of every move along the way. So it's naturally a place where candidates are. And this was a crowd that Duggan was pretty popular with. So when he dropped out, it was kind of a shock. The previous week, it kind of a shock to people. I'll say, including to me, by the way. I'm not surprised that he dropped out as more as the timing. He's a practical person. So when he saw the door closing, he decided to exit. But I thought he would have given it a little more time to make sure that that door stayed closed. But here's the deal. So he'd been traveling all over the state, and he was picking up a fair amount of Republican support, and he's always been popular in Southeast Michigan since he's been on the political scene there. And uh, and that Southeast Michigan is the kind of base for more Democrats. So he had this base of Democrats. He was doing pretty well in picking up Republican support. But what changed was just the tension and focus moving toward everything happening in Washington, D.C. and internationally with President Trump. And as this election and polling was showing that people were more and more focused on the election on Washington, D.C. and turning the election this year into a referendum on President Trump as opposed to an independently kind of evaluated race. He saw that door closing. If somebody's trying to send a message to Trump, they're not going to do it by voting for an independent candidate. So what the polling was showing was that his support among Democrats was falling a lot. And that probably wasn't because of any sort of judgment on him in particular, but a matter of trying to send a message to the president. As that door closed, I think that he just didn't really think it was realistic that anything meaningful was going to change between now and when the election happens. This going through an election for governor is brutal. It is absolutely brutal, the experience. People think it might be glamorous. It is not. There's nothing glamorous about it. And so like to go through it, if you already kind of feel like the door is closed and you're not going to win, it would be a very questionable judgment to go through with it. So he dropped out, and so it really did kind of throw things up in the air. So what does that mean for the rest of the race? Among the Democrats, there is still a contest here. You got Chris Swanson and Jocelyn Benson running. Jocelyn Benson looks like a prohibitive favorite in that race. Polling shows her way ahead. And so she kind of looks and acts like a nominee already, even though the primary hasn't happened yet. On the Republican side, there's still a very active race, and John James definitely still looks like the front runner. Perry Johnson is spending a lot in kind of that race to catch up, and Mike Johnson and Eric Nesbitt sitting in third and fourth. So all of those candidates I just mentioned have made the ballot. Okay, so they turned in their signatures. There's not going to be some broad disallowance of a bunch of candidates like there was 4 years ago. But there was one candidate, Ralph Rebrand, that has run before, and his signatures, he didn't meet the threshold when they reviewed them. So he did not make the ballot. But he was really more than further out than a long shot, just really wasn't a viable candidate in terms of actually winning the race. And so at this point, the Republicans still have a contest, but there was a lot of energy that had started to move Jocelyn Benson's way in the race. With the exit of Duggan, it just kind of created a new dynamic where it's going to be a bigger hill for the Republicans to climb in the off year of a sitting president's term. Party of the sitting president tends to really struggle. And so that's created a certain sense of expectation around around Jocelyn Benson, and it'll be the Republicans, in order to have a shot, are really going to have to convince people to go in a different direction than what these things normally go in these off-term elections, these in between presidential elections, like our gubernatorial elections are.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we've often seen Michigan swing. It's the fact that we're a purple state, right? That we've gone back and forth between Republican and Democrat, usually every cycle or every time the term is up. And so it was a little unusual too. Obviously, President Biden was a one-term president. He didn't run again. And so this is an interesting time to look at Michigan and see what it's going to do, but also the national implications on it. And so we'll be watching this race. Primary is not until August, even though it is June 1st today. So essentially 2 months from now, we will have a better idea. But it wasn't a really interesting time to be up there. Sticking with a little bit of political news, the U.S. Senate race, they did do a Democratic debate on the island. As we know, the Republicans have coalesced essentially around Mike Rogers. He is the one that will be on the ballot for the Republicans. He was fortunate to have a fireside chat up there, a one-on-one essentially talking about his policies. But there's a three-way race in that U.S. Senate candidate or Senate race, and so it got a little spicy up there. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, in this case, opposite than in the gubernatorial race, the main contest is in the primaries on the Republican side. In the U.S. Senate, the main contest and the primary is on the Democratic side. So you've got Abdul El Sayed, Senator Mallory McMorrow, and Congresswoman Haley Stevens. So those three really went at it, and they had a rough and tumble debate, and it's very, very clear that we started to talk about a candidate backing out or dropping out. These candidates are not dropping out. They are fully vested, and they're going to they will see it through. And kind of kind of remarkable to have a three-way primary where they all look so close. You know, polling will have one ahead and then the other one ahead, and so this is a really, really active and in some ways contentious campaign. So that will continue through August to find out who Mike Rogers faces. But they all look like they believe they could win. And so that's what tells me that these candidates are going to see it through. I don't think I'd be shocked if it goes if any of them were to step back or drop out before the primary. And at this point, who is the favorite just depends on who like which poll you're looking at, because they're really close.
All right, well, thanks for that update on a very eventful week up on Mackinac Island, and certainly no shortage of Election Watch 2026 coverage as we head into the primary in a couple of months. A couple of quick things though before we say goodbye today about healthcare. So healthcare, it seems like, is at the top of the news headlines every single day. And last week, SBAM added to these headlines with our own survey results. But before we dive into a brief update on those results, Brian, let's share a little bit of a news about the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan and Michigan Medicine contract negotiation coming to an agreement.
Yeah, there was an agreement that was announced last week between one of the largest health systems in Michigan and the largest insurer in Michigan. So the Michigan Medicine had sent a notice that they were going to cancel their agreement with Blue Cross over a contract dispute or renewal negotiation. And but they did end up coming to an agreement. So that was headed off before the deadline, which was June 30th, when people who have Blue Cross would have had that, or Michigan Medicine would have had to have found a different healthcare provider. That has ended now, this dispute. So I'm sure a relief to many who get their health insurance, or who have their health insurance from Blue Cross and get their health care from Michigan Medicine, that these two have come to an agreement. But it really does, what was at dispute was cost. And the types of increases that Michigan Medicine was looking for feed into higher rates. And of course, our members are telling us that they're at a breaking point when it comes to health insurance costs, and health insurance costs is just a math problem, looking at upstream health care costs.
No, they really are telling us that, and I'm gonna drop the link to our press release that we issued last week about the survey results. But Brian, I think you hit the nail on the head. Cost is the major issue here. Do you want to give just a quick 30 or
Let me
60
give you
second
just one
overview?
statistic as we close here, and that one statistic is 42% of SBAM respondents to SBAM survey, so that they are 1 to 3 years away from not being able to offer health insurance at all. I mean, that is such a what I just had to put it shocking, but not terribly surprising, given if you look at these cost increases, and now it's not just that it's 10 or 12 or 14 or 15 or more percent, but that's applied to this massively huge base. You know, it used to be that was a smaller base. A big percentage on a smaller base is one thing. Now it's a big percentage on an enormous base. And so these cost increases, if they continue over the next few years, 42% of our members are saying it'll put them in a position where they won't even be able to offer it anymore.
All right, pretty shocking statistic. We'll leave that with you all today. I shared the link to the press release. Feel free to weigh in directly with Brian or me if you have other thoughts there. Otherwise, we do hope you have a great week, and we'll see you back here next Monday at 3 o'clock.
See you guys.